Hey everyone, this is Sarah Kaki with the Atlanta Divorce Law Group, and welcome to our brand new series called Let's Be Clear. And today I have my good friend and incredible financial advisor and the founder of Oxygen Financial, Ted Jenkins. Ted, welcome on board.
Yeah, Sarah, thanks for having me on today. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. Me too. This is a conversation that is the sort of thing that's happening in more households and in more marriages than most people are willing to talk about and admit. And I bet everybody has some degree of this. And what we're talking about is financial infidelity. And what is that? Well, it is when you're keeping expenses, spending, liabilities, assets, all things money hidden from your spouse or your partner. And Ted is here to talk to us about it from a financial advisor's perspective, which is actually really brilliant. Ted is a entrepreneur himself. He's a business owner. He owns multiple businesses. I would like to call you a serial entrepreneur. So you really understand money, you really understand businesses, and you really understand how they impact families. And you work with a lot of couples that are business owners. So let's get to it, Ted. Tell me what you define financial infidelity to be.
Well, it's really funny because right now, a study was recently done, Sarah, that said that 53% of people think that financial cheating is actually worse than regular cheating.
We're talking about physical cheating.
Yeah, we're talking about sex. I mean, or
Yeah.
love or whatever it may be, and that type of cheating in here. But I think any time in general where you are withholding secrets or information, or there isn't full transparency between the two spouses or partners over your finances, it's going to lead to something problematic down the road. And in many cases now, Sarah, I see a lot of couples that are getting married later in life. They've established their own money, their own 401k, their own bank accounts. And so it becomes a really tough question of like, how do I maintain my financial independence and at the same time have full transparency with my spouse or partner? Often what I find, Sarah, is that people who are the dominant income earner in their household also think that they should be dominantly in control of the money and not have to share everything they do with the money because they make more money. So it's a very interesting conversation.
So who's more likely to be the one financially cheating? Is it the one that's earning more and feels a right that they can hold that money closer to their chest and do whatever they want with it? Or the one that's feeling financially abused and the only way they can see to actually spend any money is to go behind their spouse's back?
This is sort of the head and the tail of this. The head of it is that the person who is dominantly making more money will tend to do something called the evidence confirming trap, which means that they start to give themselves reasons about why they should be able to just buy themselves a watch or a new pair of shoes or take a trip with their friends. But the other spouse or partner that makes less money, sometimes that first partner puts less value on their job. Let's say somebody is a homemaker. It's like, well, what do you really do to make money? So you shouldn't get to spend more. And then what you see on the tail side is that person who's been controlled or manipulated to not spend will end up going behind the back of the dominant money-making spouse to spend more money. And that's where you see credit card bills and all sorts of wild things show up.
Absolutely. And from a divorce law side, the law sees that income as marital income. Whoever earned it is marital income. You may be contributing by taking care of the children. You may be contributing by going out and doing a 9-to-5, but it is marital income and everybody has to account for it. And it's pretty much the same for the debt. Ted, tell us about when you work with the couple. What are some signs you see where you can tell there's some financial infidelity happening here?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it gets down to, Sarah, that often couples do not ever talk or have the same financial goals, and those goals don't get listed on paper. And think about anything in life. This could be financially or not, but it is especially targeted when it's financial, that if your goals are not congruent. A good example is one spouse says, I think our kids should go through private school, and another one says that I think our kids should go through public school. One spouse says we do need a beach house. One spouse says we do not need a beach house. So, we are all brought up and raised and today have different values of what we think about with money and what we should do with it. So when there's not open and honest communication, around your goals and around that money communication, that's the initial problematic piece. I find often it's not the big thing, Sarah. It's actually the small micro things in your budget that really tick spouses off. That, maybe in this case, let's just say one spouse likes to gamble and they believe they should be able to spend $300 a month on DraftKings to gamble money away. And then there may be another spouse that it's like, gosh, every time I look at my Amex bill, what do I see? Nordstrom on here. Neiman Marcus. What do you need more shoes and more clothes for? And those small micro battles are really what causes a lot of conflict at home. No budget that's agreed on by the spouses.
Now, there's a lot of more modern couples these days where both of them are earning good income and they decide, hey, don't ask, don't tell. You spend on what you spend, I spend on what I spend. And then we have a shared account. I see this in a lot of our clients. They have their own separate accounts that their paychecks, their income goes to, and then they have one shared account where that's what's kind of driving the household expenses for the shared expenses. Do you recommend that? Do you have any thoughts on that? I seem to think that it works for some. It doesn't work for everybody, though.
So I'm a big advocate for having a shared joint account for all the things we agree on that we pay together, right? It could be the mortgage, or it could be electricity or gas, etc. But I'm also an advocate of giving people their financial independence. So when the paychecks come into that account, maybe in this case, Sarah gets, her allowance of $5,000 and Ted gets his allowance for $5,000, and we can spend that money any way that we want. That way, I don't want to have to buy a gift for my spouse and then have my spouse looking at my Amex card to be like, why did you pay $800 to get me those tickets to the concert? We don't want that. So we always want to give each of the spouses their own independent account so they can have some financial independence. But there's also transparency about what's going into those accounts. So however you decided as a family, it's fair and equal.
Now, the budgeting piece is really important because I think as business owners, a lot of our clients are business owners. They're used to creating a budget and looking at budget variance reports and looking at their year-to-date, end-of-year P&L. So many families don't do this for their household. And what I love about what you work with your clients and what you preach is treat your marriage just the way you would treat the business as far as the financials go. Work on a budget. I mean, you've even written a book about this. And how do you advocate couples discuss the budget variance and bring that, quote unquote P&L, the household P&L, and have that conversation and not have it turn into a big fight of what are all these target expenses or, you're gambling again?
Well, the B word is such an ugly word in budget. So I like the word spending plan. But if you're an entrepreneur and you own a business, this is no different than you running a monthly P&L or doing monthly forecasting or yearly forecasting. So it all starts with the goals. When you're at work, don't you have a KPI dashboard for your business to say, these are the key metrics in my business? Why would you do your personal finances any different? It starts with the goals of the company. That's your family finances. Then what are our key metrics for success? 1 year from now, we want our net worth to be here. 1 year from now, we want to have saved X. 1 year from now, we want to do these vacations. Then you can backtrack that into your budget to set up something that makes sense for your family.
I'm sure you run into this as much as I do. I'll sit down in a consultation with a client who felt that they were on a plan with their spouse. There was a plan that by X year, this goal would be hit. They would have this much in savings. By the following year, they would have paid off their mortgage. And all of a sudden, to their surprise, they find out that there are credit cards opened that they weren't aware of. There were trips to different parts of the world that they weren't aware of. And it truly, you can see the pain in their eyes that they really feel like they were cheated on, just like you mentioned, as if there was physical infidelity. And somebody walked out on that plan on them. When you're working with your clients, how do you consult a couple that you helped create that plan for them, and then one spouse walks out on the plan and quote unquote financially cheats on the plan and on their spouse? What
So
is your duty then as a financial advisor?
I would just tell people you never want to hire a financial advisor that can't act as a pure fiduciary, right? They want to be objective all the time. But if possible, and we have this at our firm, we have certified financial therapists. And I know that may sound like, wow, is that a made up term? No, it's a real term because there's a big difference between financial planning and financial therapy. And you may need to decide, which one do we really need? Do we need somebody to manage stocks and bonds and real estate and taxes for us? Or do we need someone that can help us counsel and talk out our money problems, which is a separate and distinct issue? Because let's say you have a case, Sarah, and we see this all the time, that if you have got a spouse or partner that's taking a lot of money out of an ATM machine, I got to tell you, there's a problem somewhere. I can't tell you if it's drugs or gambling or prostitution, but there is something in there that you just aren't probably going to want to hear. And you may or may not want to work that out, but you've got to be able to have that conversation, because it's very difficult for two spouses that are fighting over budget items to sit there and agree on that. That's what I found over the last 25 years.
Are you let's say that couple decides they end up in divorce because of this financial cheating. Are you able to continue to represent one or the other? Or at that point, do you have to separate yourself from that relationship?
Well, we never can represent two of the same clients with one person. Now, as a firm, much like you'd have in law firms, we can have different attorneys, or different financial advisors represent the two different clients, but we do our best to maintain the clients. But we, with our fiduciary rules, once we know that someone tells us they're getting separated or divorced, we really have to pay attention, right? Because sometimes one spouse will handle the finances and say, oh, I want you to make this change in Sarah's IRA. Well, it's your IRA. Unless you tell us, we can't make that change just because your spouse or partner says to do it. Or if you have a joint account and they say, well, I want to take out $100,000 right now, I can't let you do that without the other spouse signing off now, because now I know that you might be getting divorced. So we have real responsibilities. We do our best to advocate and give our clients advice, but we always recommend they get a divorce attorney, because we're not lawyers. We can't give legal advice. We can give them ideas about what they should be thinking about financially, but we try to do our best to keep them. But me, as that one person, I can never maintain both those clients.
Well, I love that you guys offer the financial therapy, because let's be real about it. Money has so much, talking about money, coming up and being honest to your spouse about desires you have on how to spend money. It brings up a lot of shame and guilt and issues for people, and they're usually not comfortable being seen in that way even with their spouse. And what I have seen is, when we have a client that feels that they were financially cheated on, what it brings up in their head is, what else could this person be lying about, right? And it's never really just the money. The money is a symptom of other things that are going on in the marriage. Like you mentioned, there might be financial abuse where somebody is just completely controlling so much of the income that the other spouse feels like the only way they can spend is to go behind their spouse's back, to go to Target or to go to Nordstrom's, or to get a better brand of diapers for their baby. Why are you not buying the generic brand? Why are you getting Pampers and that sort of thing? When you're working with a couple, what others, you mentioned the cash, you mentioned the cash. What other signs do you see that gives you an alarm that this couple isn't being honest with each other?
You mentioned one of the big ones, and I just wrote an article and did a study on this, that over half the people in this country wouldn't marry someone if they had a bad credit report. That may be the three most important numbers in your marriage. And what happens in here is that you might have a couple that say they have a joint Amex card. And in this case, let's just say that the husband is always watching over what the wife does. Every month gets that Amex report, says, Sarah, why did you spend this? Sarah, I can't believe you bought money on this. Sarah, why did we buy this? And after a while, that's exactly what happens, is that other spouse says, you know what? I'm just going to open up my own credit card. But that still is part of your overall net worth, right? Your assets and your liabilities. In some cases, I saw a case last year where one spouse racked up $90,000 of credit card debt and didn't tell the spouse, and then finally, was continuing to take money from one of the accounts, and there was miscommunication, and it was very, very a very, very ugly situation. So this is not like your favorite date night out there to swap credit reports, But I will say, if you really want to get honest and open about it, exchange credit reports at some point. That's, this is the fact. You can see it in front of you. And, it's a challenging situation.
There's the best case scenario and there's the worst case scenario, right? I think the best case scenario is you have a situation where the spouse just did not feel comfortable coming clean and did not feel comfortable about the things they wanted to spend money on, and they're feeling shame and guilt about it. So, they're going to Nordstrom's and Neiman Marcus behind their spouse's back. And we can talk a little bit about how that spouse can come clean. I think there's also a worst case scenario where somebody's actually planning for divorce and planning to leave their spouse, and they're starting to, count all their money and clean the house. Can you talk a little bit to that and
Sure.
what signs you see there and what precautions you would advise?
Well, remember, there are a number of ways that people do this, and it can materialize not in a few months, but it could take several years as one spouse strategically plans to leave another spouse. Sometimes they just gift money to their family. So one spouse may not have transparency over a checking or savings account, and I know my brother or sister will hold it in their account, and I'll just get it back down the road. You really need to pay attention today, Sarah, to cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is very difficult to track. Remember, you will never see it on a tax return, although the IRS now is asking whether or not you do have a crypto account. Crypto accounts do not generate 1099s, so you never see interest or dividends. You never see capital gains if a person chooses to not report it, and it's near impossible to track down transactions. So imagine I put 50,000 in a crypto account. I conveniently get it to some other crypto account that's not mine. How are you going to get it? How are you going to watch it? So like having the right people to know to ask the right questions are important. Sometimes people buy physical things, Sarah. They'll buy cars. A lot of cases, I'll see people that will buy gold and try to put it in cold storage somewhere. And it's like, where's the money? It's like, I don't know. Where's the gold? I don't know.
Yeah.
And thinking about how they're going to get.
And even forensic accountant can't track that.
It can be difficult. I've been invested or involved in I think almost everything that's out there. So I try to ask the right questions, but you got to really pay attention. And if you're not the operating person on that account, or your name is not on that account at all, like let's say all my checks go into my account, how are you going to, short of when it goes into court or you have that forensic, how are you going to know? And so it's a very challenging situation.
What do you see on your end about when a spouse comes to you and they start wanting to liquidate their retirement accounts or move their retirement accounts, or move stocks and bonds? We've seen a lot of clients with high assets come to us, and they see that as a red flag of what's going on here. Because I'll kind of give this for background, and from a legal perspective, once a divorce has been filed, there's a status quo freeze on moving around assets. And whenever from our end, we see somebody come to us and say, he went and moved this money around, he closed our savings account, moved the money around, all this, we see it as, he may have been advising with an attorney, and the attorney gave him this rule that once something's filed, there's a freeze. Can you speak to that on what you advise the financial advisor?
Sure. I saw a case a couple of years ago where, and again, if you're that spouse in this case and you have an IRA and you want to liquidate it, I really can't stop you from doing that, pre this, filing of divorce. And if you liquidate that IRA, you can cause tax problems for the family, and then you might try to bury that money. And we have seen that before. And we've also seen business owners that randomly tank or distort their business results to convince the spouse that the business should be devalued to a lower number. And the spouse doesn't really know what's going on in the business, or the partner in this case. And the business owner can convince their spouse or partner the business is worth nothing, when really the material asset in the divorce is the business. And so I have seen both of those. But the IRAs, anytime a large IRA account is liquidated, that should have cause for consternation, right? You have to ask yourself, like, why is this going on? And a small one, maybe not, but a big one for sure.
Ted, let's give some advice to the person who is financially cheating, and they may actually not view it as cheating. They may have all the defenses in the world to say, you know what, like this is my fun money, or he doesn't need to know about this, or there's a phrase in amongst girls or women, and we call it shopping math, where there's a different math you do when you're shopping versus just regular spending. Oh, I had a gift card for $500 and the item was $600, so I really just bought it for $100. But I've found in our male clients, that's still $600, where, I mean, we're being stereotypical, but some of this stuff has some stereotypical components to it, for men versus female. But I'd like to give some advice to the person who is, spending without letting their spouse know and doesn't feel comfortable talking about it. What advice do you give to that spouse?
So remember, there's two small red flags in here, I'll tell you, and then I'll answer this. One, if your spouse or partner always gets angry when you bring up money at all, there's probably a problem. And if they won't share passwords with you, you got a bigger problem, to any account, period. Because imagine if they died and they still loved you and you were married and you can't get access to that. But the biggest thing is I have found, as I've given therapy to clients, there is trying to figure out the why behind. Some people have a lens or a methodology about why they do what they do with money based upon their childhood. Maybe they lived in a house where they never were able to take a trip or a vacation, or their parents are always telling them, we're going to be broke. We're going to be broke. We're going to be broke.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't want to live that way when I get older. And then when they come into means or resources, another spouse may say, I don't understand. They're not planning for retirement. They just want to take vacations. They want to get a boat. But part of that isn't just a knee-jerk reaction of wanting to spend money. It's baked into how they were raised or life events that happen along the way, good or bad. Like some people grow up in a stingy household and they're stingy when they get older.
Yeah.
Some people grow up in a frugal household, and when they get older, they're like, I'm never going to live like my mom and dad. I cannot live like that. So, sometimes it's good to have a conversation with your spouse and saying, look, I'm not mad that you did this. Let's just talk about why. What drives you or motivates you in how you think about money? Because sometimes people buy material things for how it makes them feel. Sometimes people never buy that because they like the security of having money in the bank. And it's like there's base emotional reasons like why we operate the way that we do money-wise. I can tell you firsthand story. My father passed away when I was 18. My mom was a 5th grade school teacher. He left my mom with $100,000 of credit card debt. And I've lived a lot of my life being very frugal and smart with my money, calculated with it, because I never want to have my wife, my kids have to deal with that. God forbid something should happen to me. So it is definitely ingrained in the way that I operate financially, but we don't often think about, why do we operate the way that we do money-wise? What's the reason behind it? It's a good conversation to have.
Absolutely. I think that's such a gem of advice you just gave, is maybe the first step on healing this and protecting your family, protecting the financials, is for each party to just come and have a realistic conversation and say, this is what money means to me. And I don't think most of us operate through this world having that kind of awareness of how our childhood shaped our views and our feelings of shame and guilt around money and what it means to us. Some people feel richer when they spend. Some people feel richer with it in their bank account. And I've genuinely seen that completely separate attraction. Those two separate people attract each other. And it's really fascinating to watch how they do attract each other. Very rarely do I see a couple where they're both on the same page on that. But sharing that, and then really having a realistic idea of, what do you really need to spend, and do I need to know about what the ins and outs of that spending needs to be, and how can I make you feel safe to come and share with me? But I think for the person who is spending without saying anything, I don't think they realize that how hurt the other party's going to feel and distrust that's going to form when even these small expenses that they've been lying about it comes to the surface. And they can make their spouse really safe by going to them and saying, this is what my monthly budget needs to look like, and let's talk about this. you may have to go through a period of it being pretty rough in your marriage, but I think in the end of it, it's much safer to come out in the other end, which is possibly divorce.
Yeah, and Sarah, remember, the factor a lot of people have to live with today that they didn't 20 years ago is that every spouse or partner is also affected by social media. And there was always the keep up with the Joneses mentality. But remember, nobody posts their net worth on Facebook or Instagram. So what you see are these flashes of, wow, our neighbors went to Italy, our neighbors went to Greece, our neighbors put in a $200,000 pool. And especially if you're living in an affluent area that has a quasi bubble, you think about the areas in Atlanta like Alpharetta and Milton and Johns Creek where you have a high level of affluence, it can really work on you mentally. Like, if they can do it, why shouldn't I be able to do it? It's just a microcosm of one sliver of their life. And you don't know if they're in debt or not. You don't know if they're sending their kids to private school or not. We don't know all these things. So just try to be sensitive that it does affect your spouse or partner, and it may affect the way they think about what they should be able to do with their money.
And you don't know what's going on in these other households.
No, more often than not, big house, 2 Range Rovers, and all the fixings, you find out there's not that much in the bank in a lot of cases.
Yeah. So Ted, you've written an awesome article on this actually that we are going to share in the comments here. And can you share with everybody where they can find you if they want to contact you or your group at Oxygen Financial?
Yeah, so I've got 2 things. One is I'm really starting to crank out a lot of cool videos and information, like shorts that I think can help you financially. I started a little channel called whattedsays.com. But you can always get information from us if you want to talk deeper about this at oxygenfinancial.com. But I'll tell you, if you're a YouTuber and you like little 1 to 5 minute videos on things like this, I'm really trying to get people more educated, more literate, have these straight talks like this of here's how this all works at What Ted Says.
I love it. And Ted, that's one of the things that I feel like you and I share really strongly. We really like to inform the consumer and empower them with the information. And that's really the whole point of this. We call it Let's Be Clear, which is we want to give out one of our core values here at Atlanta Divorce Law Group is to give clarity to our clients and to anybody out there that's going through this process. And Ted, thank you so much for giving me your time on this. If anybody needs a financial advisor and needs a group that really understands money and it has a holistic approach to it, I can't give a higher recommendation than Ted Jenkins and his group at Oxygen Financial. And everybody have a wonderful day. And thanks again, Ted.
Thank you.